Welcome, Mr. McLennan and Ms. Hurd. You've submitted, or we've received a written submission. Do you wish to table that?
Table.
Okay, thank you. Now, do you wish to say anything else, or are you happy to leave it at that and proceed to questions?
Proceed to questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I might kick off. I was curious about a point you make in your introduction in your written submission where you state, and I quote, if the reported 9/Southern Cross Austereo merger goes through because the reach rule is lifted, it will be exempt from the public interest test, and that would be scandalous. Why do you make that claim?
Because the merger will not have, the outcome of the merger will not, they won't be held accountable as the rest of the media will as it relates to the public interest test.
Are you talking about the proposed public interest test under the legislation
Correct.
that's before the Parliament at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay, and how would that test not apply to a transaction such as that?
Yeah, take it.
Our reading of the bills that are currently before the Parliament is that there is an interim period before the framework is fully established and operational, and whilst during that interim period there is an ability for any deals done in that period to be looked at afterwards, once the framework is set up, they don't have to acquire prior approval that the transaction would meet the public interest or not lessen diversity, which is quite a different thing to having to actively prove before you can go ahead with your deal that you have either not lessened diversity or met the public interest.
So you're making an assumption there, are you, that merger would go ahead immediately if this rule was lifted?
It appears that way, based on the speculation that we've seen in the media and what we've heard in the market, and it looks that way at the moment. Okay,
thank you. I might move to other members. Senator Ludlam.
Thanks, Chair. Look, and I'll carry on that line because that's actually quite an important piece of information. Are you proposing, so for example, a tie-up occurs between Channel 9 and Southern Cross, which is a hit of about 10% on your revenues, I understand, on Channel 10, that the public interest media advocate, if it gets up as it's drafted at the moment, would in 5 or 6 months' time have to be contemplating a divestiture or a disaggregation of those two entities?
They would have to contemplate that, but as the bill has been written at the moment, it'd be too difficult for that to happen. And I guess, you know, our perspective on this matter is that if the reach rule is pulled away, this merger will happen very, very quickly. I've been involved in many mergers on both sides of the fence, and I think what you'll see is an automatic reduction in diversity.
Is it the case that Channel 10, as part of free TV, supported the lifting of the reach rule late last year? And can you just step us through how your position's evolved, or if I'm misrepresenting you, then just clarify the record?
That's sure. That is not quite correct. I'll get Annabelle to talk to that point because she was around at the time.
This is your first day on the job, isn't it?
This is my first day.
Welcome.
Network 10, has never said a single word in favour of lifting the reach rule as Network 10. In any meetings that we've had with the government, with Cabinet, with ministers, with any politician or the bureaucracy, the Convergence Review, Channel 10 has never sought to lift the reach rule. There were 24 words in a free TV submission to the Convergence Review out of 8,600 words, which mentioned the reach rule and said that perhaps it was time to look at getting rid of it. Free TV is a consensus-based organisation, and in the sort of cut and thrust of getting consensus, you often let things go through. That was, you know, perhaps we should have been clearer, but Network 10 has never lobbied to lift the reach rule.
Never lobbied, but let's just be clear, without counting the words, in that free TV position of last year, and maybe you can explain for us how that came about, as a consensus-based organisation, you were in support of the reach rule. So what has changed? Or you didn't try and block it or have that language taken out?
Well, probably the biggest thing that's changed is that we've now seen the context in which we're contemplating removing the reach rule.
That it would impact your commercial interests?
No, that we would be looking at the reach rule going through, perhaps with a public interest test, but none of the other recommendations that the Convergence Review made, for example. I mean, the Convergence Review recommended lifting the reach rule and introducing a public interest test, but it also removed some it also recommended removing some other major regional diversity and media ownership rules, including the 1 licence to a market rule for television, the 2 licence to a market rule for radio, changing the voices test to be much broader. So we're saying that getting rid of the reach rule in the context we're discussing now, today, is not the way to do it.
All right. Our concern is carving it out. We need to look at the whole package in its totality, not carve out the 75% rule. We think that's very dangerous. We think the implications for regional Australia are great, and we shouldn't rush it through. And we're very, very concerned.
Okay.
And I think we just need to be clear that mergers are about taking costs out.
Yep, well, we've heard that, and that's really the point on which most of the morning's submissions have dwelled. But can you spell out for us specifically why the lifting of the rule would lead to a loss of diversity in regional markets in particular? Why is that the case?
Well, I think, as I said before, the whole issue around mergers is to centralise as many functions as possible, take costs out, and it's about finance and numbers at the end of the day.
Is that how Channel 10 has treated its regional affiliate to date?
No, because there isn't joint ownership in that regard.
There is?
Isn't.
Isn't.
And I guess, my point here today is to say when there was the concept of the 75% rule being abolished and being rushed through Parliament, we were alarmed by that. Concurrent to that, there have been market rumours about this proposed merger. This appears to be real. And I don't think that we can afford to have this rushed through. And again, I just emphasise, I think we need to look at this in the totality of the whole package.
Well, I support that contention, and that's why we're taking your point seriously about the public interest test, that effectively all these deals could be done over the next few months that would then need to be reviewed and potentially unpicked by the PEMA. That's your point, isn't it?
Yes.
That is, and I think it's impossible to unpick them.
Why is that?
My
reading of the bill is that they actually would have that power to do so.
Well, I know. I think the practicality of that happening is very difficult.
Yeah.